Hi guys, welcome to the session Xamarin Forms Deep Dive. I hope everyone is doing fine and all are staying safe. So myself, Hari Krishnan. So welcome to this session. So this session is going to be a follow-up session of what Anbu Mani had already taken. So he might have gone through the getting started with Xamarin, Android, iOS, and Xamarin Forms. So this session is pretty much going to be, a deeper dive into the Xamarin Forms version of, approach, and we'll be seeing a lot about how we can write code and using XAML and what are the things that are available in Xamarin Forms to, develop a cross-functional application. So that's all we're going to see uh, uh, in this episode. So just in case, if anyone is new here, just confirm me that you all are new and just to check if I'm audible to everyone so that we could proceed further without wasting too much of time. So just comment uh, uh, on the comment section that I'm audible and in case of anyone new, okay, take that as a confirmation and proceed. Am I audible? All right, fine. So we have okay, fine. Without wasting too much of time, let's directly start the sessions. All right. So Xamarin Forms deep dive. So shall we start diving in? All right. So about me, myself, I'm Hari Krishnan. So I have an overall experience of about 6.5 years in IT industry and into Xamarin for about 5+ years now. And I'm predominantly working on Xamarin platform now, and you can follow me on all my social medias. I've given the links over here, and you can also check out my website xdevlogs.com, so that you could see the recent post about Xamarins and things that I write in. So yeah, so the agenda for the day is going to be we're going to touch about what is Xamarin, the description for Anbu Mani's link, which we had explained in detail, will be shared in the description, and we'll touch upon that, what is Xamarin and what it's all about, and then we're going to see about what is XAML and what are its features and how it contributes to the MVVM and what changes that MVVM brings into the development in Xamarin and the binding in Xamarin. And then we're going to see about some other features like styling and a few other features which are there, which contributes to the development of Xamarin. So that's all we're going to see today. So what is Xamarin? So it's basically, Xamarin is all about an open source platform from Microsoft for building, cross-platform applications like which is targeting Android, iOS, Mac OS, and tvOS, and watch VRs, of course, with a single shared code called C#. So that's all about Xamarin Forms. So as you had, if in case you had attended the previous sessions of Anbu, you would have known that there are two approaches in Xamarin, which is a traditional approach and then the Xamarin Forms approach. So in this session, we are predominantly going to see about the Xamarin Forms approach and its advantages. But as just in case of anyone who is new, there are two approaches: Xamarin traditional approach and Xamarin Forms approach. The traditional approach is all about um, doing the Android or iOS specific development with the C# knowledge, whatever we have in, with the UI being developed in the native. So that's all about the traditional approach. Whereas the Xamarin Forms approach is a hybrid approach, it's a cross-platform approach, which gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of code sharing, both the shared C# logics as well as the UI. So as this picture itself demonstrates, Xamarin is all about writing once and running everywhere else. So that's very precisely about Xamarin, and this explains how Xamarin Forms works. So you could see that what we will do is we will create an activity indicator in Xamarin, which in turn will be shown in the UI as a progress bar in Android and an UI activity indicator in iOS. Similarly, for any control you take for instance, a label starting from a label to an entry to a complex architecture like list view, collection views, and all. Everything just works like in this pattern. So to explain a bit about this in detail, this is how it works. Fine. So what we see here is these very simple control. Let's take an example of image. What we see outside is the image on any platform that we run in. However, how it actually works in Xamarin is what we are going to see now. So actually, Xamarin does a lot of work in the background for us to to shorten our works. So, for example, if we are creating a Xamarin Forms image control in Xamarin Forms, what Xamarin framework does for ourselves is, it has a built-in renderer which converts our Xamarin Forms image into the corresponding native image. So whenever you create a control, there is something called renderers which comes into picture for any control, be it built-in controls that we use in or any custom view that we create in Xamarin, whatever be it. So these renderer parts come into play with, and this in turn, the Xamarin framework creates the native view for us, and then that comes into the picture. So users who are seeing the application, at the end point, who will not be facing any, differences that this is a cross-functional application or something like that. What they see is the actual native application. Whereas for us, we're just going to write one code that targets all the three platforms. So why Xamarin? What does it gives? Why is it so special? It's because it gives you everything that you need for an application development. Any tools, support, plugins, and you know uh, any kind of support that is required for building, testing, and delivering an application is given by Xamarin and Microsoft. So that's what makes Xamarin very special about. So you have the community to have something new. If you wanted to have, if you have any custom requirements, there are so many custom controls, free versions and paid versions available in the community, in the market as well. There's a huge marketplace for Xamarin, Microsoft, where a lot of third-party vendors comes into picture as well, and huge Xamarin itself, has the uh, GitHub place to record your features, voice your voices to for any bugs that you need to fix in. So it's pretty much everything that you need at one place, and that's what Xamarin is all about. It's a highly equipped framework that gives you everything that you require from scratch to delivery for just free. That's what Xamarin is all about. So what other advantages that Xamarin carry is the performances. So any cross-platform application, typically when we think about we tend to think about it as a cross-functional applications or a cross-compiled application. But what Xamarin does instead is it does not cross-compile. It has its own compiler and optimizer. So how things are performed on par, like how the performance is obtained as similar as on par to the native in Xamarin Forms is like Xamarin iOS does a full ahead of time compilations that produces an ARC library in the app for the Apple IPA, whereas Xamarin Android takes in the advantage of JIT compilation for Android devices. So anything that we compile or anything that we write in C# is actually converted to a native ARC library. So using the own compiler and optimizer techniques that Xamarin having, and that's how performances are boosted. So coming straight away into the topic, what we have today is XAML. So XAML is something which is a predominant tool for developing the UI for Xamarin Forms. So of course you can do that in C# as well. So if you are someone who's used to developing in C#, yes, of course it is possible to do whatever we do in XAML in C# as well. But XAML makes things very easier. So it lets you see how the UI is actually rendered, how the UI actually looks like, and it is easy and simple to maintain the UI of your applications. And it also contributes drastically to the MVVM approach, which is which helps you design your UI separately and your business logic separately. So the XAML stands for Extensible Application Markup Language. So what it gives you is it helps you declaratively define your UI, and it's something very similar to XML, but it's not just about that. It's more than that. You would see a lot of features coming into play with, and a lot of customizations coming to the picture. We'll see that. We'll see in our demo session. So this session is pretty much going to be a lot of coding rather than the uh, uh, speaking of content, because we're going to deep dive into what actually Xamarin Forms is all about. So we have seen a lot of content and things in the first session given by Anbu. So this session is pretty much going to be about coding. So what are the features of Xamarin? Is it's great for MVVM. So you could design your UI separately, and you can isolate your business logic separately, so that you could develop a loosely coupled applications, and it's excellent for the it gives you actually exactly the visual representation of what your UI looks like. And the main thing about Xamarin is, it's toolable. The Xamarin is toolable. You have features like hot reload and Xamarin Previewer, which we'll be seeing in the demo session. So it helps you, not to, rebuild or compile your applications every time. Xamarin Previewer is very cool stuff. You don't have to do anything. You just, previewing the XAML shows you how exactly the UI is rendered when it comes to uh, any XAML or any design, even the custom design we create in Xamarin Forms. So about MVVM, so MVVM is basically the model view model approach. So this is basically for developing a loosely coupled applications. So the model part is the data that is given for the applications, and the view model is the business logics of your applications, where you can write your logics, and the view is the user interface. So the biggest advantage of MVVM is when you are especially working in enterprise level applications, where the UI will be developed in one area of the UI module will be developed in somewhere, whereas the business logic will be developed somewhere. The data preparation would have happening in some other locations. So this MVVM, gives you a chance to do that and to integrate everything all together and get it tested and packed and delivered. So that's what the advantages of MVVM is all about. So how this is accomplished using data binding. So what is data binding is all about is consider linking two properties. So the UI is of one object, whereas the source for the UI, where the values of data is coming from, or the target source object. So it's about linking. We need a paradigm to link in these two objects. So that's what data binding is all about. So any changes in one places reflects in the others, and that's how typically it works, right? And this is an integral part of MVVM, of course, because that gives you a lot of flexibility and advantages. And any view that you are going to define in XAML is going to have one binding context, and that's how it works. So how typically the binding works is this context is the reference part for any object to go and search the data files. That's how it works. So any view will have a context. The data will be residing in that context, and looking out for the properties in that particular context will give you the value for that property. And all these happens in the runtime, and hence it saves you a lot of time. So that's all about data binding. And there are two types of data binding in Xamarin Forms. So the one is the conventional data binding, where your data comes in from a view model, or an external source to the UI, whereas another type is the one where you can take the data of one view to the other one. So that's sometimes required. So that is one other model. You'll see both the you'll see the demo for both the types of binding in our demo session. So what conventional binding brings in is it defines the bindings to link a property in a page to a property in the view model. That's how it works. How it works is the through the binding context of a page. So it's not just about page. Any visual element in Xamarin Forms, if you wanted to do a binding for that, you need the context to be set accordingly. So this context is a it will by default take it from the parent. Like for example, once if you set the context for the page, so the children of the pages all will be passed down to that same context of what the parent has, unless until if you are explicitly defining context for any other objects. it will take the context of its parent. That's how it works. So this is one example of how we know binding works in. So you could see that this is the syntax where this username in the first entry comes in from another object called uh, view model. So this view model class will have a property called username, password, login command, and all. So that's where the data comes from. And the second approach, which I said, is the view-to-view binding. So here, the data bindings links a property from one view to another view. It can be on the same page. So that's how it typically works. So what it gives you is, it lets you do whatever you want. So this is one, well-known example of how this happens. You could see it from here. The slider will have a property called value. Using that value property, the text is for the uh, label, which is the third label, is shown, as well as the rotation of the first label is decided. So the value of one view is made the value of some other properties of the other view. So the value property of the slider is given to the rotation property of the first label and the text property of the second label. I mean third label. So that's how it works. So one view binds to another view. How it happens? You have to mention to that particular view that this is your reference. This is where your context has to be. There are two cases where you can do it. Either you can set the binding context directly to that particular view, or else to that particular property as well you can do it. I'll show that when we are seeing the demo. And to accomplish this, how this data flows, how this binding happens, and all, when it comes to conventional binding, there are various binding modes. So the default will be can be either one way or two way, depending on the views and the properties and the nature of those and the characteristics of that particular view and property. One way is something where the data from the source flows to the target. So that's how it works. So data from your view model goes to your view, whereas any changes in the view that you do doesn't reflect in the view model. That's how one way works. One way to source is a vice versa of that. Anything that you do on the UI will be updated to your view model, to your target. And two ways, it happens in either ways. A typical example would be the entry. So where uh, whatever has been in the source will also have to be rendered, and whatever input that you are giving in the input area and the UI will also have to be always synced up. So whenever you need data to be synced between your backend as well as your front end, you could use the two way. Whereas all you need is to just showcase whatever data comes from the back to the UI. You can use the one way. And in cases where you don't have to reflect back, all you need to do is just save whatever UI, whatever data is given in the UI to the backend. You can use the one way to source. And there is one other binding mode, which is one time. So this is something very similar to one way, but the only change is that the data flows from source to target only at the time of initial binding and only when the binding context changes. Other than that, the data does not go from source to target. So that's how it typically works. So what Xamarin Forms offers you, is, as I explained in the rendering model, it's just one UI. So one UI code which renders you the native UI on any platform that you use it. So the styling of the applications is basically going to be exactly like the native. However, there are options where you can control this. There are various options where you can use and control this. You can write your own stylings, and there is an option to set it visual, so that set the style of your UI to have a material design of same standards on your both Android and iOS applications. And in certain cases like banking applications, or sometimes your application would have requirement to have your UI to be consistent. In such cases, you can use such. Otherwise, there might be some requirements where you need to style your applications based on your your own requirements, rather than having the conventional styling of the platform that what it offers. So for that, there are various options. So we'll be touching upon that. So one option is styling. So styling lets you, do write custom styles for your UI, how your UI should look, and it also helps you, in defining the standards for applications. So you can write or define the styles in a various methods. So there are explicit styles where you can, explicitly mention an UI item that this is going to be the style for that application, or you can write an implicit style where the style will be applied uh, for that particular UI item across the application or across the page or across, the layouts whichever we have, depending on where you define that implicit style. And then the global styles. So as I said, to have a standard of, what a UI should look like across in our applications. So that is also possible. And style inheritance, this is something which is an awesome thing. There are cases where you have to, um, avoid writing a lot of code. So there might be situations where, your codes are, lot of duplicated. So to avoid that, you could write a style based on another style, so that you could inherit a derivative style from a base style, and so that you can have a lot of options and varieties. And then the dynamic styles, of course, you have to be responsive. So sometimes in cases, you know you don't mean only requiring styles to be very static. You might have to, differentiate your UI, or want your UI to respond, uh, depending on how things are in the runtime. So that's where dynamic styles comes very handy. And the device styles, there are pretty much, defined styles in the system that will help you write some, uh, uh, predefined styles to apply without having to write too much of code, and you can straight away start using those styles. There are certain list of styles, whatever which can be used. I'll show that particular styles list in the next slide. And one other option is the style class. So here, this is something very similar to the explicit style. The only difference is, multiple style classes can be applied to a visual element for these style classes. So we'll see all these things in the demo. And regarding the uh, device styles which I mentioned, so these are the device styles. So one is the body style, caption style, title style, subtitle style, and list item detail text style, and list item text style. So these are built-in styles that are available in Xamarin Forms. All you have to do is very simple. Anywhere you're defining a style, just mention the style as dynamic resource and give this name. You don't have to predefine the style anywhere. For any visual element in Xamarin Forms, just define this line: style equals dynamic resource of any style among the style which you need. It will be applied on the board. That's how it works. So, and there are many other features in Xamarin Forms. So one is the style using cascading style sheets. All you need to do is, just add your CSS into your project, and then, define it as an embedded resource and mention it as a resource for your page or your application. The style will be applied. And the themings, so Xamarin Forms allows you to customize your theming, and it also allows you to respond to the theme changes in the runtime. And one other thing I was talking just before is the material visual. If you want your application to be consistent across applications, so Xamarin Forms allows you to do that as well. So these are features which are, keep on updating and getting better day by day. One other thing is the visual state manager, where you can write styles based on states. So there are some common states available for any UI in Xamarin Forms. You can also write your own visual state groups as well. In case if you are someone who's familiar with WPF or Silverlight or in Vinati technologies, you might be pretty much aware of what this is all about. So this is one other feature which is available in Xamarin now, and these are certain, advanced features which lets you customize the UI as as best as you can. So there are some other features which are recently available as well. You can use shapes, you can define paths in Xamarin Forms as well. So those are advanced features where we can touch upon that in the future in case we get chance. So Yeah, fine. So that's pretty much about what Xamarin Forms could bring you in terms of UI designing. So let's start coding without wasting time, so that we could touch upon things. So let me just create an application. So if you're using the latest Visual Studio, the UI is a little bit changed now. I'm using a version before the latest one, which is available now. So all you have to do is just click the new project, search the mobile over here, and the mobile app Xamarin Forms. Choose next. You can give whatever name you wanted and choose your location. So I usually put this in my work drive. So here, let's have this folder. Let's give the solution name as Xamarin. Create. So there are a lot of options available for you when creating applications. You might have heard about this in the first sessions as well. So I'm not explaining everything in detail here. Let me just create a simple blank application. I need Android, iOS, and UWP, all the applications. I'm just creating applications. So just in case for someone who's new, in the meantime, this application is created. So I have another uh, solution which is ready over here. So this is the structure of Xamarin Forms application. So all you have will be a .NET standard project where you're going to write your shared UIs and logics for your applications, and you'll be having an Android, iOS, and UWP applications, which is going to be the startup applications for your applications. Predominantly, all your codes are going to be on the .NET standard projects. In case if you need any platform specific requirements to be achieved, uh, that's where you come to native and start writing your code in the native projects. Other than that, in case of you wanted to customize a UI look of and any UI that is used in your applications, or you wanted to access any device specific informations, even that is also possible right from doing it in the .NET standard project itself. Xamarin has a library called Xamarin Essentials where you can access almost all the predominantly used, all the frequently used Xamarin Forms, Xamarin native features right from Xamarin Forms itself. Apart from that, what we have in the Essentials package, if there is any information that you need to access native specifically, and that's where you come to the native part. All you have to do is just set this project as startup project, and you're ready to run in the corresponding platform. So whenever if you're developing your applications from a Windows laptop, you can straight away run that in Android and UWP without any problems. For running your applications in iOS, you have to get your laptop connected to another Mac agent using the option which is available here. So you would see an icon here. So click on that. So you can pair to a Mac. So you can give a name of your Mac or the IP address of your Mac. Here I already have my Mac connected over here. All you need to do is whenever you add a Mac, it will ask for the credentials of your Mac. Once if you enter that, it will be padded. So if it is paired, you can see the output of your applications right from here. Once it is paired, you can see the list of devices, whatever is there in your Mac machines here, and you can start accessing that here. So there are two options to see that. If you wanted the output to be seen in your Windows machine itself, go to Tools, check out here the Xamarin section, click on the iOS settings, enable this remote simulator to Windows. This will allow you to see the simulator right in your Windows laptop itself. So all you need is you need the Mac machine to be available on the same network. That's it. You don't have to be worried about anything else. So all you need is Windows machine with a Mac machine connected to your network, and you can start developing the Xamarin Forms application. In case if you are developing from a Mac machine, you can develop only on Xamarin Android and iOS. So the Windows UWP version is not possible to be done from Mac. There you can straight away use the Android and iOS emulators and simulators in case of iOS and emulators in case of Android and start developing the applications. And you can also connect to the real devices if possible. So yeah, here the project is created. So you could see that by default there'll be a main page where certain set of features are already available, and I've told that Xamarin Forms is toolable, so it gives you all that you need on uh, all you need to do is a very less amount of coding in Xamarin Forms to have your development to be done. So let's run the default application and see how it looks like, and then we'll start adding some features on top of that, and then we'll touch upon the styles so that we could cover almost whatever we have in this session. So we have about some 25 minutes or left now, so that will give us enough time to see some of the features that is available in Xamarin Forms. So yeah, so here there is one other feature called the Xamarin Forms Previewer. This helps you, see what this UI looks like without having to, run your applications. So this is one feature I was talking about in the when showing the slides. So it will for the first time alone, it will take some time to load the preview, and then it'll be very responsive. So the incremental builds are very faster when it comes to Visual Studio 2019. Yeah, so the UI has picked up. You will see a simple white screen with a label, "Welcome to Xamarin Forms." All right, fine. So this is our output in Android, and you can see that the same has seen here. And the best thing is, you can see that on many devices, whatever you want. You can see how it looks like in an Android tablet as well. So that's the best part about this preview. You can see for both Android and iOS as well. For iOS, again, you have to be connected to a machine. And let me just run this on iOS. Again, as I said, I'm picking up the Pro, which I have launched it already ready here, and see how it works fine. So we'll first see how this runs on all the platforms, and then we'll start doing the changes in the UI. We'll see what it offers, and then we'll start customizing the UI based on our needs, and then probably we can see the output at the end on the other two platforms. That's how we can go it, so that we can save some time and rather than compiling and running every time. And we are going to use this hot reload approach. Whenever we edit in XAML, we are not going to recompile our applications again and again. That's going to save us a lot of time. Here, so things are fine. So one other thing in Xamarin Forms is the detailing. So we can take advantage of even the native specific features. So that's what um, this Xamarin offers you. So here I've defined the IO specific. So now what we can do is we can take advantage of the native features here in Xamarin Forms in the native as well, and we can take advantage of that. So this gives you use the safe area in Android and in iOS for whenever you're using X phone X and above. So those are the features, those are the level of uh, you know level of features that is given by Xamarin Forms. You don't have to put your effort too much. All you need to do is just configure simple things and write a few codes. You can get that done, even for platform specific requirements. All right, so let's do the same thing. Let's run this application on UWP as well, so that and then we can start customizing the application as we need. Fine. Yeah. So this is how it works. Fine. Let's go back and start editing our UI. So let me run this now. So I've shown you the previewer. There's one other awesome feature called as hot reload, which is you don't have to recompile your code. I can edit the code right even in the runtime. The UI will be reflected whenever I save these changes in the UI. And one other additional thing is the controls and the toolbox over here. As I mentioned, it's toolable. All you need to do is there are 40 plus controls available in Xamarin Forms. Where you can just drag and drop and use those features right away from here. So we'll be doing that now for developing applications. All right. Fine. So now what I'm going to do is, welcome to Xamarin Forms the session. So I'm just saving it here. You can see that the UI is refreshed here. Even for any changes in this particular view, I change the background color. You can see that the changes are applied then and there. All right. Fine. Now let's start. Uh, adding more features onto this. Let's develop a very simple UI called let's say a login form probably. Entry will have a placeholder, username, and text that username, username property. Let's not have these binding parts as of now. Maybe let's just design the UI. Entry, placeholder, password. Let's see how easy it is for us to develop the UI, and then we can add features on top of that one after the other, so that it'll be easy for us to understand. Yeah, fine. So just save this. You could see that things are updated then and there. And all I'm going to do is set the option to this center. See that things are updated then and there. And now let's go to the binding part. Let's start understanding how this binding works. And so first, let's come to the conventional binding. So I'm just not going to waste too much time in defining these things. Let me just take this view model from the one which we already have here, so that we can explore and cover in a lot of topics. The hot reload works fine only for the XAML changes, whereas for the any changes in the UI or in the background, we have to do it by ourselves. We have to recompile it. Fine. So let me define the identify property change. The command will be inside the Xamarin Forms, and task, threading that task, and for the notification change here. Fine, we've resolved all the assemblies required. And then let's take the UI from here. Fine, all I've done is, this is the typical binding part. Uh, Text username. So what I have done here is, this part is very crucial. maybe we can define it here. Yes. You don't have to do it. There are two ways of defining binding orders. Either you can do it over here, or you could do it in the back. I mean, the what is that? In the code behind as well. So either you can have things defined here as this particular application. So all right. So that you can define the view model over here. Otherwise, there is one other option where you can straight away go and define the binding context as here, equals to the object whichever you want. Both of just the same. Since we have already defined in view model, I'm just skipping this. Those who are very much C# familiar guys can do that in that way. And fine. So this gives the address of our UI. This informs our UI that this is the reference why the data has to be gone, has to be checked for. So this username, password, login command, these properties all are just the properties that we have in here. We have property called username, password, valid login, busy, and login command as well. So you can see that I've configured the property changes for few properties, so which are going to change in the runtime. For any changes typically that happens in the runtime, you have to configure this property change. You have to notify that property that it will be changing in the runtime. So let's run this. And there are some other features in Xamarin and Xamarin Forms and in any Microsoft technologies that allows you to do the development faster. So someone in case someone who is here very new to Xamarin Forms who does not understand how to start or where to start, when to start, you don't have to worry about when it comes to Xamarin Forms in terms of writing the code. All you need to do is just come in, start writing your code and see what are the characteristics of the controls that are available here. Simple. This has been, the predominantly used properties for any control. This comes in for any control in Visual Studio. So this lets you understand the behavior and the most frequently used properties of that control and get started with the application. Or let's get started with developing the applications. And you don't have to be knowing too much. All you need to understand is just to know what that particular control does what. Like label is used to display text, entry is used to have an editing of a single line. That level of basic understanding is enough. You can just straight away start writing the code here. See that things are here. So whenever I do something, I have my validations done. You can see that the animations and things are cool here. So for doing these validations, all we have done is very simple thing, just 5 lines of code in here. So we have few properties defined in here. So any values that are given in here flows from here to the uh, view and from the view model to the view as well. And we have some activity indicator loaded here as well. So which responds in the runtime based on the properties that is modified here. So we have configured the SBC here based on our button click. This one enables and disables in the runtime. And this SBC, since it has the property changes, gets responded in the runtime as well. This is how typically binding works. So all these are one-way binding where the data comes from, like two-way binding when it comes to entry. The one-way binding is something which I said here. Any data that is given here will come from here to there. If we want it, we can even if you change the default values of username here, at the time of running itself, you could see that that is coming up in the UI. Let me not waste that time here doing it because we have to see the view to view binding as well. So for which let me take this. So it'll be easy for me to explain that. All right, let me just comment it out. Is this thing? That's it. So you can see that these UI is pretty much awesome. So what we have seen here is this particular thing does not need any references to binding at all. Even I can comment this. This typically works fine. Why? Because we are not using any data from outside. What we have done here is it has a label which have some styles defined here. So the first label here is a simple title label. The next one is a label with a text rotation, and then a switch slider followed by a label. What we have done here is we have taken the value of this switch, and using that value, which is the toggle value of that switch, we have controlled the enabling of slider, and using the value property of that slider, we have controlled the rotation and the value of the text in this in the label here. So similar to what I have shown in my slide, how this is controlled is as I said, there are two ways of doing it. I've exactly mentioned that here. So one way is to inform your label that, or any view, that this label is going to take the values from the reference which is mentioned here. So your view has to be mentioned with a name as I've done here. So this slider has been made as a reference for this entire label. So any property that we define here, whichever, if it is set as binding, then it will look for the value of that property in the switch. So one other way of doing it is, if you look at the slider here, this entire slider is not given the binding context. Instead, what we have done is we have only set up the is-enabled property to the toggle, where that value has to be taken from a different source called switch. If we wanted to control a different property of, let's say height, we can do that using a different property uh, from any of the properties as well. Instead of switch, we can take it from the labels which is below as well. So that's the advantage of doing it at the property level here. Whereas for here, it will be assigned as a context for this entire label itself. See, these are the two ways where you can control your context from one view to another view. So let's see how this works fine. So as I said, if I'm enabling this switch, this gets enabled in the runtime. So based on what I do here, this is mapped to the another property. So you could see that it is highly responsible. It is flawless. The text and the rotation properties are controlled seamlessly. It works very fine. Awesome, right? So that's the advantage of XAML, and all we have accomplished is in is just hardly some 5 to 6 lines of code. Yeah, all you have done is define few properties, and many of these properties are just stylings. The actual code is just 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's it. So just 4 to 5 lines of code. You have made your UI very responsive. That gives you a lot of flexibility. So this is one classic example where you can take in the values of one view to the other. You can pass on those values. So anything that you do, you can manage within your UI. So this is one. This is called as view to view binding, and there are various other layouts. You can instead of using stack layouts, you can use the grid. You can use content view if you just wanted to host only one view. You can use flex layout as well. There are relative layouts, and the frame gives you a built-in outline color and gives you shadows and effects as well. So these are the layouts that are available in Xamarin Forms. Cells, if you are using a list view, you can use any number of cells within that list view cells. And there are of course many views like the box view, which can be used to draw a border or block a certain area where you can have certain colors. Activity indicator, which we had used in our application, it helps you show the progress. And button, of course, it used. And carousel, it carousels your more than one, let's say, like pictures or any informations to be shown. And collection views, and next version of list view, where it brings in virtualizations for the view. It helps you, reuse your views in an efficient way. And there are a lot of other controls which we can have a look at it whenever you start exploring. All you need to do is, just take it from here, drag and drop. That's it. The default properties of that view will be ready. You can straight away start using it. As I said, use the steps. The frequently used properties will be shown as star here. Here it is being used. So let's take an entry here. So it will show what are the frequently used properties of that particular, and you can start using that. So this is one cool thing is password. It will hide on the text where as you type in. So these are the features. Fine. So the next one which we had mentioned in our slide is the stylings. Let's go to the styling part here. Fine. So let me show you the stylings one by one so that we can understand things better. Let's take the example here itself. Yeah. So all you need to do is just define the content page resources. And you have to write your styles. So let me first copy the style from here. Maybe like this. All right, so what we are going to do is, you could see from here that I have just used the properties whichever are shown here for this label. The font attributes. Yeah, fine. I've mentioned the font size as large, so we can remove this. Horizontal options as center, vertical options as center and expand. So for these, instead of defining these many things, all I have done is I've reduced the code. All we need to do is just mention this style class here. Take resource of its time. That's it. So this is what is called as explicit style. So we'll cover all the styles, list whatever we had in here, explicit, implicit, and see how it can be used in our application, so that when you write your own code, you can customize it accordingly when like how you need it. You can see that the style is applied. So without wasting too much of time, let me show it from here. So fine. So if this style is not mentioned without any name, let's take this as a look. So you could see that I've just defined my label as this. Maybe another label can subtitle. So all I wanted is I wanted my labels across my applications to be using a particular standard of style. So that can be defined as a style with a target label without having any key. The only difference between the first one which I shown in here is there we mentioned a key and we used that particular key in while we are using that particular style, when we are declaring that particular style. Here what we are going to do is we're not going to write anything. We're going to implicitly import the styles. Just write a style for target type and run it. Any label across that particular page will be applied with that style. That's how it typically works. So for now here, we have some labels all defined here. So we can see how it behaves and then understand how it actually works fine. Oh, um, let me run it on Android. How this typically works is, the compiler will first look for the styles defined in, and then on top of that styles, if you have overridden with any hard-coded values of that particular UI, then that UI is taken the high priority. So now we could see that here. So here we have hard-codedly defined some styles. So these labels, which does not have any built-in styles defined, takes the default style. Whereas for these labels, here we have hard-codedly mentioned those properties. We have mentioned those styles, since hence it is taking that particular style. So these are the implicit styles. And if this style, instead of defining in the particular page, if we go in and define it in the application level, then that is called as global style. So any label across all the pages that are used in the application will be applied the same style. So that's what global style is all about. And then comes the style inheritance. So style inheritance is nothing but, look at here. So these are simplified one. How it typically looks like is, if we wanted to have two styles, this is the actual code. So all these properties has to be uh, retyped. So to avoid these things, instead of having these lengthy styles, what we can do is, this is how it typically has to be for having two different styles. So the style inheritance allows you to have a base style which predominantly has all the reusable things into style, similar to the way we use inheritance in C#. So now we can see that I've just reduced the number of lines. So I've defined all these reusable things into a base style, and I've used that, mentioned this style has to be taken based on the base style and defined, and the outcome is just the same. And dynamic styles are something which are applied in the runtime. So here for the dynamic style, you could see that I've mentioned a dynamic label style where I've not mentioned anywhere here what that style is all about. All you can do is, whenever I toggle a button, I can inform that this dynamic style should be applied with any of the styles that is already defined. So I have the label red and blue style which is already defined here. So based on my input in the runtime, so I'm changing the style of the label. So that's what dynamic is all about. So, and device styles. So device styles, as I've given the list over here, any number of styles that can be used. So let's take this body style. So it is very simple. All you have to do is define a dynamic resource and mention that particular style. And saving that would say change the style here. You can see that the styles are changed here. If you change this to title style, then the text is changed here. This one is applied based on the dynamic style in the runtime. So that's how it works. And then the style classes. So style classes is something very similar to the explicit styles here. But the only difference is, you could apply multiple styles, as I said. So let's take the box view here as an example. Uh, I have defined a style. So with any number of properties and values on, I have mentioned that particular class as separate over here. All right. So here, if I don't give this, typically this box view will not be seen anywhere in the UI. Look at that, the line is gone here. If I mention it here, let's see that there is a line coming here. So this is what the separate is all about. Even if you can apply multiple separators here. You can add on a command, and if you have more style separate classes here, you can do that as well. For one of the box views, if you have multiple box views, if you have multiple styles, then you can apply that different styles here as well. So that's what this XAML gives you flexibility with. So yeah, that's all about the styling in Xamarin Forms. So there are lots of other features. Recently, we have shapes paths where We can write or use our own paths to draw images instead of having images and a lot of other things to be done. I've just given an overview of what can be done with the code here. So I hope that helps in. So this pretty much proves that anything that you could uh, you wanted to be done can be done only with Visual Studio. And so this .NET, which as Anbu had mentioned in his sessions, so .NET gives you anything. It's your platform for building anything that you need. So this Xamarin Forms, you could see that it targeted for Android, iOS, and Windows. UWP platforms, and it even targets Windows Forms. Similar way, it also targets any latest technology that is available now. So that is just one-stop purchase for anything that you need. So yeah, so I hope this would have been definitely helpful for you guys. All you have to do now is just visit the Xamarin.com, go explore yourselves and get to know a lot of things about the UI and Xamarin Forms, and do come back with us with feedback. If you have any doubts or anything that you require, or anything else to be taken in addition as well. So we'll definitely be very happy to help you out. And the reference is whatever I had shown here in the slide, the demos and the slide contents whichever I've shown here, everything is already available in the GitHub here. You can scan it out and you can have a look at it later. You can the demo part, whatever I've done here, for everything right from the start to end is already available in the GitHub source here. So I hope that helps. So any queries? If there is any queries, you can drop it out in the comment section so that I can pick it up. Is there any query?
Hello, hey bro. I think we don't have no query. I think.
All right, fine. That's great. Okay, thank you then. As I said, you can follow me or any of the social networks, and in case of any doubts on seeing this YouTube video later, you could just drop out your questions on the comment sections as well, or you can contact me on any of the social networks, and I'll be very happy to help you guys.
Yeah, bro, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Thank you, bro.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having me here. I hope that was useful to a certain extent. Very happy to be a part of here.
Yeah, sure, bro. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Have a good day then.